Okay, so welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for July 3rd, 2019. We're going to follow our standard agenda as outlined in issue number 725. So getting started, first of all, does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to share? No. Okay, if there's no announcements, let's move on to the agenda items. The first one is tagged, it's 24347. Make compat finished match HTTP1. Let me just take a quick look at that one. I think this is still waiting on Anatoly. He had some concerns over the PR had stalled, which is why it was tagged for the agenda, but he is working on it, it sounds like, and he commented as recently as yesterday that he'll have some more information in terms of tests and so forth. So unless anybody else has any comments on that, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, let's make a quick note.
Hey, Michael, would you be able to promote Jeremiah?
I did already.
So now Trott needs to be promoted.
Yep, there we go, promote panels. Okay. Okay, so moving on to the next one, which is new core modules go under namespace, which is 21551. Just going to take a quick look to see who tagged that for the agenda. I know this is a fairly long-standing issue, but
I can present it either way. I'm pretty familiar with it, if that's helpful.
Sure. I'm not sure who. Yeah, it was Rich who added it. So I don't know, Rich, if you want to talk to this, or you're happy to have Myles talk to it. Rich, if you're talking, you might be on mute.
His mic is not working, so and he says in the chat for me to just take it away.
There you go. Okay.
So namespaces are something that's come up a couple times. I know that we didn't discuss it that much this year at the Collaborator Summit, but last year in Berlin was where we had actually had like a longer conversation about it in 2018. This came up initially, like this issue, around the time of HTTP2. And specifically with the fact that us introducing new modules potentially shadowed ecosystem modules. And, we kind of got off easy with HTTP2, where Node 8 actually broke that module, and the module author decided, well, if you're going to do HTTP2, then I'm just not going to bother fixing it. So we kind of got a bit of a mulligan there. But this is something that's come up kind of time and time again with worker threads. When we were talking about maybe naming workers, that wasn't able to happen because of ecosystem naming. So the discussion started in there around, like, could we create a Node.js namespace somewhere where we could put a reference to likely, like, all existing modules would be put in there aliased, but also like that new modules would go only in the namespace and not in a flat namespace like what we do today. There was debate at the time. There was kind of like two major facets of debate. One of them was, what was the mechanism we were going to use? So like, did we want to do @Node.js/ or Node.js : or Node.js : or hashtag Node.js #bang. I don't know. Like, that's an obvious place to start bike shedding, is the mechanism itself. And then the other one was, if I recall at the time, some individuals from the technical steering committee we're not convinced that we necessarily needed namespaces and that it might overcomplicate things. So since then, a couple other things have come up, which have shown, at least to me, that I have a bias. I've always wanted them, that namespaces might be necessary. One of them is the PR that prompted this conversation, which was a PR from Gus, that would allow us to have, like, because right now in ES modules, because of the way in which we've done things with FS promises, you need to import promises from FS and then destructure the promises object, because we did not do FS slash promises. So there's a pull request open. I believe, I can't recall if it does FS slash promises or promises slash FS, but either way, it's putting things into a namespace. Like, we need to put things into a namespace if we wanted to allow that structure way of importing things without creating the security problems that came up with setting up the file system that way from the get-go. Other things that are coming up that might require namespaces include WASI, which is the WebAssembly System Interface. WebAssembly System Interface is being set up to be in a namespace called WASI underscore unstable for now. It will eventually be WASI, but that's using the mechanism of a URI type scheme, so WASI underscore unstable colon. There's been some layered APIs that have been introduced by the browsers that are using the std colon namespace. And there's also stuff going on right now within TC39 looking at standardizing built-in modules, so not too different from like what we do in Node. And the namespace mechanism that proposal is looking at is also the URI scheme of JS colon. The idea being that these URI schemes can be taken over to IANA and actually standardized. So, you know, if there's n number of schemes, those schemes can, you know, all be specified, not be kind of random, and you know, there can be some sort of scheme. Overall, I still am very bullish that this is something that we should do. I'm also very bullish that we should follow suit with Node.js colon. While none of the other things in the ecosystem have, you know, like officially landed with that, I am not hearing a lot of pushback elsewhere in the ecosystem around this. And we could kind of take lead in showing, hey, we're going to use this mechanism. And I'd personally be happy to head over to IANA and try to get the namespace mechanism standardized. So that's kind of like a high level overview of where we're at right now. And I think the decision that needs to be made, or at least discussion needs to have, is like a recommendation from the TSC into that issue about what we should do moving forward. A good chunk of the work is done, although we would need to do some benchmarking to ensure that the current mechanism isn't like causing any performance detriments. But I personally didn't want to pick up and keep working on that PR until we had some sort of consensus about how we wanted to do it. It seems like Jeremiah has their hand up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of reiterate my kind of stance on this, which I don't think has changed. And that's that if there's going to be like an official way of doing this anyways, or like a language built-in one, I'd really like to avoid the situation where we have some selection of things under like a standard namespace, which we're kind of stuck with because we've had that. And then we have like this intermediate namespace that maybe some things are under that aren't in the other ones. And then we're also using the official namespace. Like if we could not have that intermediate step, I think that would help not be so confusing and cause us less technical debt in the future.
And I think that we're at a point right now where, at least to myself, the writing on the wall seems fairly clear. And I think that if we were to choose that namespace and standardize it at IANA, we would set a precedent that other standards orgs would follow.
So Trott asked, is it possible to implement namespacing behind a CLI flag, which we could remove after there's some standardization in place? Yeah, I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to. The question is just what do you put behind there? So say this was required for, I think the PR is still open to add a MIME types module to Node, in which case, is that entire module then experimental or not? I think that's the thing that would need to be decided upon, is like what we would actually put there behind it.
Yeah, definitely. It would be possible. Like, I mean, the code path that would go and parse the specifier string and figure out if there's a namespace there. You know, that is something that we could put behind a flag. Also, if it gets standardized, like, I mean, one thing that we could also look at doing is Apple is leading the charge on standardizing built-ins at TC39, and part of that is actually looking at building into the VM part of the mechanisms for parsing the specifier. So we could potentially reach out to those folks and see like how much is expected to be written by the host and how much would be by the VM to ensure that we're not doing too much. But either way, I'd imagine it would be like a refactor and performance boost in the future if this ends up, you know, like in V8 itself. I think we could put it behind a flag, Rich, if we wanted to, but the second that we start landing APIs, unless those APIs are also experimental, it would start to become like a barrier unless we're planning on landing the APIs outside of the namespace. I'm hearing silence for the most part here. Does anyone outwardly object to namespaces or the Node.js : scheme?
I'm just looking at the issue itself. Who are the people who objected the last time? Are they, I guess more question, are they here?
Some of the loudest folks were not even collaborators.
Okay.
The loudest objections, I believe, like Jordan Hardand had concerns about namespaces. It's his PR, but I was the one who kind of was working on it because it needed some refactoring from the initial implementation, which was based on the file system. I can talk to Jordan and see where he's at. I know that folks from NPM came in with, you know, pretty strong opinions that we should be following suit to how NPM has done namespaces with @Node.js/. That was what Jordan wanted to see as well. I believe that Anna was not, a trott needs to be promoted again. I believe that Anna was not like super bullish on namespaces, but I don't recall Anna being like against them to the point that she would block. That's what I recall from kind of the voices in the room. To me, you know, the direction where we're seeing the rest of the platforms going seems to be erring in the direction, you know, that I'm pitching on this PR. And I really don't think that using the NPM namespace is a good idea, especially since we have other people in the project talking about wanting to publish modules in the ecosystem to that namespace as well. And I really don't think that we should be doing, you know, publishing things to @Node.js/ on NPM if that's the namespace we're going to be having built-ins under.
Yeah, that sounds could be very confusing to people.
Actually, Myles, can I ask you about that? I mean, I kind of like the Node.js : I don't have any problems with it. But to me, using @Node.js, you said that we shouldn't be doing that, but isn't it kind of nice if all of our modules are in the same namespace, whether we compile them into Node.js or whether you install them from npm.js.com? It would even allow us to do both, like for backwards compatibility. Like for old LTS releases, we could publish to @Node.js/ whatever. But for the latest releases, it would be available as a built-in, as @Node.js/ whatever. Right? Like if we're not going to do that, I think there should be a, you know, some sort of reason why, more than somebody doesn't like it.
So yeah, I mean, personally, I think that it's really important to have a distinguishing thing between things that are taken from the registry and installed via NPM versus things that are built into our platform. I mean, there's no reason, for example, that if we start breaking things out and vendoring them in, that we couldn't have a combination of both. So if we think about something like fetch, which hasn't landed yet, but I'll use that as an example since we're looking at vendoring it. There's no reason why we couldn't publish to NPM if it's completely vendored at Node.js/fetch, which itself could check to see if Node.js:/fetch exists. And if Node.js:/fetch doesn't exist, use the source text that's in the module, which could allow for polyfilling. It feels really odd to me that the same specifier could be a built-in or not a built-in, depending on the version that you're running on. It would seem odd to me that the same mechanism for reaching built-ins could mean something different between things that are built in versus things that are published. The modules that we have that are built in are maintained by us and, you know, like have a certain level of maintenance expectation that I don't know if the ecosystem modules that we're talking about publishing will have the same degree of care. I think there's also a question regarding bugs and vulnerabilities. Like, if we start publishing ecosystem modules, will those ecosystem modules fall under like Node.js Core's vulnerability, or will it be an ecosystem vulnerability? Who will be managing those? Like, the second that we start conflating those things, it just seems odd to me. That's my personal opinion, though, and I see a lot of valid reasons for moving forward with at Node.js/ as well. Like, it is, people know what it is, they'll recognize it. It's not a new thing that they need to learn. So I can see the benefit to that as well.
I'm convinced that it has too many downsides. I'm not convinced by the maintenance aspect of it, but everything you said before that was pretty convincing to me personally.
So I have a question that's, I guess, more of an implementation detail. So we have right now a bunch of like module names that start with underscores, and we're kind of exporting callback-based APIs and then now adding promises. Could we use this as an opportunity to only export like ES6 modules using promises APIs to kind of clean things up a bit?
I think that that's a yes and a no. I think that we definitely should clean up in the sense of like, we could limit the modules that we export on that namespace, but then I don't think that we should take it as an opportunity to like replace all the APIs, especially if we want people to upgrade to use the namespace. It would be, I personally would not, I do not think it would be a good idea to make like Node.js:/fs by default the promises export. We could do like Node.js:/promises/fs, which was something that I was thinking of doing. And we could eventually, I guess, switch that. We could have promises and callbacks or something. We could think of like a nice scheme there, but I don't think it would be a good idea personally to use this as an opportunity to clean up too much stuff, because then we're basically just creating like a whole other API surface in the namespace. And I think that will not just hurt adoption of it, but it will also, it just feels weird to me.
I'm not quite sure if I agree. Well, I agree that we should not get rid of the callback versions. We may want to consider with further discussion making the promise APIs the default, as much as I kind of regret that. I think that would happen, would need to happen as a somewhat separate discussion now, or at least complementary discussion.
Yeah, and I guess something that we could do, if like to what Rich said, if we start with namespace and we do it as an experimental API, so we at least like work out the mechanism of the namespace itself and how we handle the namespace. If we put that behind a flag, we always could revisit like what's being exported in that namespace at a later time as its own discussion.
It's possible that even just a warning, you know, just a warning appearing that, you know, you're using experimental namespace might be enough to, you know, train people to expect changes, but no, I'm being optimistic. That's not going to happen. Never mind.
The second that we make Node.js:/fs a thing that doesn't require a flag, it's going to leak into ecosystem code. We won't be able to change it.
Yeah,
Like,
warning or not, that's true. Yeah, you're totally right.
So is the PR that's there pretty much what needs to be there except for the namespace, or are there other changes? I'm just wondering if like the best way forward is to like continue to work on this PR or open a new one.
Well, the problem is it's kind of stuck doing it the wrong way until namespaces are there. I think is how I would summarize it. Would you agree with that, Myles?
Semi. I mean, like the switching from @Node.js/ to Node.js: is like a set expression. It's not actually a huge deal. I don't know that the way in which we're doing it in that PR is the most efficient way to do it. There is a lot of noise in that PR, so it may make sense to close that PR and open a new one just to kind of like start the conversation fresh.
That's what I was thinking, is that might be useful to, and then you can make the arguments that Sam was talking about, like here's why this one is the right one versus the other one. And if you want more discussion, go read over there, right?
Mm-hmm. What I do think we should do, though, is we probably should follow up with Jordan Harband first to make sure that they're on board with that. I don't want to like undermine PR.
Absolutely.
So I can follow up with Jordan on that. I'm heading out on vacation soon. So I'm in the next like 2 weeks and then I'm gone for like a month. So if someone else wanted to pick this up, they're welcome to. I don't know if this is extremely time sensitive. I feel like it can maybe wait until August. But if I can find time between now and when I leave to kind of get the ball rolling on it, or at least so we're unblocked on what to do next, I'll do my best to get that done. But if someone else wants to pick this up, including people who are listening, feel free to reach out.
Okay. Taking the notes. Okay, so any other discussion on that one before we move forward? Okay, no, so let's move on to the next issue, which is 341 development kit and deployment release issues. I think actually last time we agreed to close this and basically just wait to see, or at least take it off the agenda and wait to see that, okay, postpone concerning it further until we have a list of things either to be removed or smaller. So, okay, so yeah, that shouldn't be on the agenda anyway. Let me remove that. Okay, so I'm just going to remove it completely since we did last time. Okay, so next one, nominating Beth. So Beth is just still here as an observer as per our regular process of inviting people to come for a number of meetings. The next one, 698, doc update the TSC charter. That one, I believe in the last CPC meeting we did discuss, and it sounds like it's ready to land. There is a PR going through to just clarify charter changes, so I think it may be worth just waiting for that. So that's in progress. And then finally, we have our strategic initiatives review. So let me take a quick look there. Okay, so modules, anything new on the modules front?
We have an open PR for the exports proposal. The exports proposal would allow us to have an exports field in the package JSON, and that would allow you to specify all of the deep exports of the module. So when you do like import Lodash / for each. So it's a mechanism to allow you to specify all of that, because we've removed file extension resolution by default. And because, when you're deeply searching from the module, that always has to come from the root. This would allow you to specify, like any file within the module to be a specific export. This also pairs very nicely with import maps. So this information would be able to be used by both Node and the browser. The other thing that's really nice about it is by default, it will make it so that only the paths that are exported are the ones that can be reached. Now, this is not foolproof. You could always do a deep reach directly into the Node modules folder to get whatever you want. but this does create a little bit more of an explicit contract of a public versus private API surface, which is not something that currently exists. So that landing is the last of 2 bits. That and some work that we're doing right now on custom loaders are the last 2 bits that I think we really need to do before unflagging modules. So in my personal opinion, we're still, relatively on track, hopefully, to unflag in time for LTS.
Okay. Sorry, just took a few notes. So NAPI. So I think most interesting is we're meeting with the WASM team today to talk about potential, use of WASM and NAPI together in Node. We'll report back next week on that. Otherwise, just our regular evangelization work and addressing issues and so forth in the community. Next, I'm just looking at who else we have here. Governance. I don't know, Myles, should that even still be here?
We probably could drop it at this point. I think the last thing that we were leaving it on there for now about was making sure that we had the charter changes in place. But I think that we've done that. And I think that the voting for, we've mostly covered all that stuff. So I think we probably could remove it at this point.
Okay. New streams APIs, Jeremiah?
Sure. Did Matteo give any update on streams related stuff in the weeks I was kind of away? Does anyone know?
Remember too much specific.
Okay. So there's kind of a couple of things going on at the same time. Not necessarily related to the new streams initiative, but kind of related to streams initiatives in general. So there's a continued thing there's now a PR open for stream transform.by to allow you to better use existing streams with async function generators, which is pretty neat. Also, kind of parallel to things, there's been some work on something called StreamX, which is a great simplification of our existing Streams API, almost as Streams 4, if you would like to look at it as that. I will leave a link in the notes to that, if I can paste it in. I'll have to do it later. Also, work on my sort of take on streams things, the Bob streams. So in the time since JSConf.eu, there's now a Streams 3 adapter. So you can pipe Streams 3 streams to this new streams thing and back again, as you wish. And also I am presently working on getting full automated tests up for the sort of spec repo, which is, I think that's what fishhawk123/Bob is going to become, is more of a spec repo. We're still considering when the best time to pull that into under the Node.js org is. I think that's kind of the summary.
Okay. Okay. Open web standards.
We had our first meeting of the OpenJS standards team yesterday. For those of you who are not following along there, if you go to github.com/openjs/standards, you can find information there. Just drop the link in. We're planning for bi-weekly meetings on Tuesdays at 10 p.m. What is it? God, I'm totally forgetting the acronym for Universal Time. That's where my brain's at right now. Thank you for.
Did you say it was again? 10 p.m. UTC?
10 p.m. UTC. So 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 Pacific, 8 p.m. Central European. So we're doing bi-weekly meetings. The first one was yesterday. We didn't really go through too much. It was like a really high-level discussion about like what would we like to do, what are programs we could run. The OpenJS Foundation has a partnership with both ECMA as well as W3C. But we can't just make that like an open thing that anyone can go and do. So it's like, how do we decide who would be representatives? How do we make sure that all of the projects that want to participate or want representation are accurately and being represented? How do we make sure that people who are doing work are able to attend? There was also discussion about some of the work that's being done right now around like outreach. So how do we make that maybe a slightly more official thing that we're doing within the foundation? And another thing that, you know, will be on the discussion will be a discussion in the future, but hasn't been yet, is a discussion around, God, what was I going to say? This is actually related to namespaces, but if we end up having a built-in namespace for the JavaScript platform, there's discussion about like domains and like who should be able to publish to namespaces. And there might be a need in all of that for a neutral party that isn't one of the standards orgs to be a place that kind of maintains a registry of what's allowed or what's registered in built-ins. And I think that there's room potentially for the OpenJS Foundation to be that third party. So, you know, these are the kind of problems that we're looking at engaging in. In general, if Node.js has needs to either attend standards meetings or to, you know, have things handled, this would be a great place to open them. But, you know, like as always, we do have a lot of people on the committee now and in the project as a whole who participate in these. So, you know, you should still always feel comfortable to come to myself or James or other folks who have participated in the standards orgs to help make sure that, you know, the things you care about are said. But also if you're interested in coming and participating, you know, I'm happy to sit down and kind of go through what's the process of getting involved and help try to like coach you or come up with a plan for your organization if you want to approach it from that angle rather than from the foundation's angle.
Okay, just taking that last note. Okay. And then finally, I think the last one is build resources. Rich?
Yeah, I have to make a appointment with you, Michael, and we need to talk. So that's probably the next step there. So I'll at least get that done this week. We'll keep inching this forward.
I'm not in on Fridays, just as a heads up. So, okay. I think that's it for the list on our list of strategic initiatives for the people that we have representatives here. And that takes us to the end of the agenda. So unless there's any other things that people want to talk about, we'll call the public part of the meeting. Okay, so if everybody else can just hang on for a little bit, but I'm going to close the stream.